What is up, Fantasy League enjoyers? We managed to hit another top 10%. We got a top 7 this time around. Hopefully you did solidly as well and you're happy with your outcome. This video, normally I would go into depth about certain teams and how they played and everything else, but I'm going to save most of that for the Pick'ems video. That's going to be coming up later on today, so it's going to be a double header today. So please keep an eye out for that one. I'm literally just waiting for Valve to update the Pick'ems so I can continue with the next stage. We did very well in our previous one, but all of that talk will be over on that video. So this is going to be focusing fully on the Fantasy League instead. Obviously, there'll be some crossover because we'll be discussing players that performed or didn't perform, etc. when we're making our decisions. But we got top 7. Very happy with the Mongols. They proved me right. I thought these guys would go through 3-0. I thought that they'd pretty much dominate this stage, and they did. Tons of points from Azino and Techno, who are great value for money. JKS was also a really solid shout, quite cheap. Got 92 points with Liquid going through 3-0. And then Halzerk was quite disappointing. So at one point, Halzerk was on minus 22 points. Because Complexity started off, obviously, at a 0-2. They flubbed the first 2 games. They looked, if I'm being brutally honest, they looked shambolic, they looked terrible, and then they came back with those best of 3s, but they didn't quite make it in the end against Big. So Halzerk got me 41 points, which isn't terrible, but when you consider I paid 207,000 for him, and there's so many other ways that I could have gone instead. I could have dipped down to more of a budget player, then picked up an extra player instead of Jacasmo. There's a lot of things that I could have changed around, but I had faith in Halzerk, and 41 points not really repaying that faith. Jacasmo on 11 looks bad, but he was only 186,000, so actually I take any positive points from a player that's under like 190 as a win, realistically. And if Passion had managed to win their last game, then he would have probably been on like 20, 25, 30 points, and it would have been really nice value for money. So I'm not really that bothered about Jacasmo dropping 11, to be honest. It was a gamble pick. I thought Passion UA could squeak through. I thought he could get me some points, and he did. So top 7%, really happy with that one. It's maintained our spot in second position just behind Nart with 2 points. So that same difference is still in play. All we've really done is extend our lead away from the third position, which is Maui. I was mistaken though, so I'm going to make a correction here. I originally thought that 1.5 times points was in for the entire major, but I was told that's not the case. It's only starting from this stage, from the elimination stage. So it makes it a little bit more scary because any mistakes you make, you're going to be punished way harder, and any success you have is going to make you accelerate way quicker. So there's a lot more pressure on this now. And you also have to factor in how ridiculously close these opening stage matches are. There are no easy ones here. G2 take on the Mongols. Na'Vi face Liquid. Vitality versus Gamer Legion. Then you have Spirit against Furia. Mouse and Pain. FaZe take on Wildcard. Heroic take on Big. And then 3D Max are against MIBR. So there are a ton of games here that are very similar in terms of sort of skill level, I would say, in terms of consistency and the overall performances of what we've been seeing from these teams leading to this stage. If you didn't know much about CS or you hadn't really been focusing in the last couple of months, then there are some ones here you look at and you're like, that's a slam dunk. FaZe against Wildcard, are you serious? Vitality against Gamer Legion, these are easy games. They're not easy games at all. We've seen Gamer Legion go through 3-1 and look really solid in the process. They look polished. They look razor sharp. Wildcard have come out of nowhere on a lot of people's radars. Into the Americas RMRs, beating Liquid, going through flawlessly. A lot of people wrote them off and said, oh, it's a fluke. They're not going to do anything now. They're 0-3 for me in my pick'ems. And they proved you wrong. They're now through to this stage against FaZe, a team that notoriously starts slow and hasn't looked fantastic as of late. That is a very tough game. And then 3D Max have been consistently just pushing further and further and further forward. It always feels like, oh, this is where they're going to falter. This is where their ceiling is. This is where they're going to, come to an end. And it just seems to keep going. They're like this juggernaut train. Not the fastest, but it just plows through everything that's in its way. And they're against MIBR. MIBR made it through by the skin of their teeth in the last day of the tournament, actually earlier today, as I'm saying this, and looked pretty good. But I think 3D Max can beat them for sure. Like, they're definitely a team that can win that. So super, super difficult fixtures here. And it's been really tough for me. I've gone back and forth multiple times on this team. I don't even feel particularly confident about this one. Normally, I feel pretty good. But this is a team I've gone for. So we've kind of spread the wealth a little bit. But we are mainly going with FaZe, but they're budget FaZe picks, if that makes sense. I'm going to explain as to the reasons on all of these, though, because FaZe were super, super cheap. So Carrigan, 183, and he actually had some really good performances at the RMRs. It felt like, you know, he realized the likes of Brokey was having an off day at the office, or off few days at the office, and so he really stepped up. Rain's 194k. You already know I'm a big Rain fan, especially when it comes to majors. He's a big game player. This is where he normally shines, and so 194 for me is a no-brainer. I think he's going to be picked a lot by many, many people, not just because of the fact it's Rain, not just because of the fact he's 194k, but he's also against Wildcard in the first day, and I think people are still going to be underestimating Wildcard and assuming that Rain and FaZe steamroll them. But I think for me personally, I can justify doubling on FaZe here because Carrigan, I think, is a little bit better than his value right there. We know he can have horrendous games and drop very few amounts of frags, but I think it's worth it in terms of double stacking FaZe. A team like, let's be honest, you can never write off FaZe. You can never say that FaZe have 0% chance of progressing through to a tournament. They always find a way. They're such an experienced group of players with still tons of ability on this. I will say some of the concerning assets to me are, will Brokey play like he did in the RMRs here? If he does, they're going to struggle. Is Rops able to land a decent level of play? Because we know what he is capable of on his day, but he goes missing so often. If both of those pieces are gone, then I don't see Frozen solo carrying. Maybe Rain dips in with some big performances as well, but that's where FaZe are going to struggle, especially when they start playing against the big boys. You know, depending on how the seeding goes through and any potential upsets, if they're playing against the Spirits or the G2s or the Vitalities, that's where it's really going to be found out, or of course the Na'Vis as well. I'm still believing in the Mongols. I think the Mongols will make it through to the playoffs. I actually even think there is a chance that the Mongols can make it through to the semi-finals the way they've been playing right now. Some people will call me crazy on that. Some people will say there's absolutely no chance. I'm not saying they're going to win the major, but I think they're going to make it through to the next stage. I really do. And Mazinho, for me, for 202,000 is phenomenal value for money. This guy is almost going to guarantee you points, if nothing else, just for headshot kills. As I've said many times, 65.6%. You are pretty much always going to get points, if nothing else, just because on the server, he's going to be clicking heads off. Bit, super dependable, super solid player for Na'Vi. I did want to try and find a way to get double Na'Vi into this. What kind of put me off just a little bit, though, is that I've remembered a couple games where they were kind of shaky, and additionally, if you're not going for the top 4 players here, Alexi's 195k, and that is very expensive for an IGL that's probably not going to get too many points individually speaking, unless Na'Vi crush through with a 3-0 and you slap a leader on him. Well, they're against Liquid in their first game, and that could be a tough one. I think Na'Vi may very well drop a map, maybe even 2. I do still have them as the slight favourites for the major, but considering how all over the place these results have been so far, and Na'Vi looking a little bit on the shaky side coming into the major, that's what's putting me off just a tad. And then I wanted to get a Vitality player in. I've got a lot of faith in Mezzi. He's a player that goes under the radar a lot. 204k is pretty expensive, but he is playing for Vitality, and if you're not going for Mezzi, you're going to drop down to Apex and he's 193k. Obviously, you're not going to get a look in for Spinks, Flamesy, or Zywoo because they're way too expensive. So this was a way that I felt like I'm going to believe in FaZe to do what FaZe does best, and that's grind out wins, grind out results. Gonna have the Mongols there as well as an ace up the sleeve for Mazinho to just pop off. They could beat G2. G2 have been looking shaky as of late. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes there. And then I did want to have Vitality. The downsides for me is I have no Spirit players and I have no Mouse players. And that does hurt me a little bit because I want to go for those players, but there's only so many, dollars that you have to spread across the entire team. And I feel pretty okay with this. Not happy, not confident, but I feel okay. We'll see though, because maybe this is where FaZe's time runs out. Maybe this is where they can't quite grind out the W's and the victories. And I will say, if FaZe have a bad performance here in the elimination stage, Carrigan is probably going to get me a lot of minus points, and that is potentially the anchor of this team. So we'll see. Have I picked the right players, or have I messed it all up? We'll have to wait and find out in the next video, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. Comment below and let me know how you've been doing in the major so far, and also how you are looking up going into this next stage, because it's really, really tough. And as I mentioned before, keep an eye out for the Pick'ems video, because that'll be dropping later today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.